everyone's having a great time so far. Now we're going to transition into something a little bit different from the sessions we've been having so far. So we are going to start with, we're going to have two AI creators on stage here for this panel, and we're going to start with an experience. So Leo here is going to give us a presentation, walk us through the journey of creating art with AI. And after that, Polly from Hugging Face will join us and we'll have a discussion on creativity and AI. And we want to make this session a bit more interactive, so as time allows, we want to leave some room for one or two audience questions in the end. So yeah, so before we start, I want to give a quick introduction of Leo. So Leo Bossiou is a final year PhD student in operations research at MIT, specializing in healthcare and sustainability challenges. He bridges operations research and artificial intelligence to develop multimodal decisions that integrate sustainability into business and public policy. He is also a passionate teacher and has received multiple teaching awards here at MIT. Leo is also a generative artist and loves to push the boundaries of creativity using generative AI tools, which he'll share a bit with us about today. So let's welcome Leo on stage.
This amazing conference, could you help us design something cool, like some AI vibe, neural network, brain, with an MIT somewhere, say, okay, just make it cool. Say, okay, I got that. So I quickly had my idea. I wanted to create some sort of MIT dome with some neuron design. Like I quickly looked on Google, saying, this is what I want, this vibe. And say, okay, this is what I'm going to build. So I literally jumped at Midjourney, one of my favorite AI generators. That's a platform hosted on Discord, uses some state-of-the-art diffusion models, and it works like a bot. You can discuss, you can input a prompt, and it generates automatically the different images. It generates 4 of them. If there is one you like, you can upscale it or create some variations. So I literally input what I thought. Let's create a MIT dome looking like AI neural network. And I got that. It was okay-ish, but it was not what I imagined at all. So I said, okay, let's try DALL-E. My top favorite model, actually, if I want to prototype something quickly, is just that DALL-E doesn't have the same refinement in terms of nice design, but it understands language better in general. It works a bit similarly. You have the possibility to input a prompt, and it generates 4 images. Clearly, I did not get the vibe I wanted, say, okay, I abandoned DALL-E. And in general, I quickly checked, in fact, they did not know MIT. That's from the way it was trained. DALL-E was a bit better, but Midjourney had literally no idea of MIT. So I say, okay, I need to be more creative there. I need to craft something more creative. So in general, when I want to start making a creation, I have like a quick idea of a design. So this is what I put over there, like an incarnation of AI into an MIT student. That's overall what I want there. And then I can give some extra context, some extra ideas, details. And this is what I put there, like some Boston shaped like a neural network. And then finally, I give some style. You can really customize with adjectives, for instance, futuristic, realistic design, whatever. And I got that. It looked interesting, kind of fancy, but also scary. I didn't want that to appear on the poster. So I say, nah, I need something cuter, maybe. But it was too cute. I thought, nah, I can't put this on a poster at MIT. That's not working. That's not working. Say, okay, I want more emotions. So I put love, quiet, beauty, and it was nice. So I thought, nah, I can't still put that on a poster. It's not the vibe we want. And I say, okay, I want to build an emotional connection with the people. So we all relate to gimmicks like art. We all know Mona Lisa, we all know Michelangelo. So I said, can I merge those two. And I could say like, it looked promising, honestly, but I did not have much time, and I would need much more prompt engineering, maybe some modifications in Photoshop later to make it happen. So I say, okay, I abandoned this idea. It's cool for later, but I don't have time for that. So I thought, okay, in fact, among all the things I've generated so far, this one was what I found to be the best. It had like, it was Boston, shaped a bit like a neural network. So I thought, okay, that would be my first proposition. But the problem is that MIT was missing. The whole point was to have MIT in the poster. So I say, okay, that's fine. I will edit myself with Photoshop. So yeah, I said, okay, I quickly prototype something. I took a real picture. I merged them. It looked kind of okay, but I fell short of my expectations. I really wanted to create something stylish, merging with MIT. I did not get what I want. So I thought, okay, what can I do now? Like, the problem is it doesn't know MIT, so I thought, okay, let's force MIT inside. I literally took a picture that I really liked online of MIT. You can see it's like you're seeing the campus, the river, Boston behind. Say, okay, I'm going to take this picture and I'm going to apply some transfer to the image. So I literally went again to Midjourney. It's very cool. You can upload a picture and you can craft a prompt to ask for the model to take your initial picture and transform it a bit. And in particular, I use adjectives that I know work well, like cyberpunk. This is a very cool adjective that always yields a lot of super cool stuff. So this is literally what I got. It was, wow, oh my God, this is super fancy. And I got super excited. I started creating like so many versions of MIT. Oh my God, that's so nice. And in the end, the initial one was just the best. So I upscaled it to maximum resolution, made a few adjustments in Photoshop to improve all the details, and then that was it. That was the first design. This is how the whole process worked. So okay, fantastic, nice, printed everywhere, I'm happy. And then a week later, there is Sam and Neve, they came to me and say, hey, we liked it a lot. Like, could you actually make it to like a tote bag now? Say, okay, yeah, why not? Look at that. And then I quickly take my phone and say, hey, I put a quick prompt on the phone, and I immediately get some super cool design out of it. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's going to be a piece of cake. I'm going to do some super cool art. But then they started telling me, yeah, but the logo needs to be quite simple. Generative Vibe has to feature MIT, and also you can only use 6 colors, a specific format. I say, oh, wow, okay, I have. So it won't be that easy. So okay, but I still got that. And then this time it was due tonight also, like I had only a few hours. So I say, wow, okay, let's start right away with a picture of MIT. Now I learned from the previous experience. I started at 10 p.m. and then I saw, okay, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT, give me some prompts for my art. ChatGPT gave me some super cool stuff. Say, okay, I literally going to take one, copy paste it, and this is what I got. So it looked nice. Like I appreciated the vibe, but I did not get any specific emotion looking at it. It was just nice. And I wanted an emotion, so I said, no, not good for me. And I started playing around like a bit crazy, trying all sorts of stuff. Some of them started getting pretty cool. So I say, okay, let's proceed. And then sometimes I quickly iterate over and over. I remove some words, and in the end, out of chance, I got this, and I felt, wow, that's cool. I feel the vibe. I feel like it's exploding, colors everywhere. That's generative. And I quickly generated a few variations, upscaled it, maximum resolution. Sam and Anne loved it. Say, okay, perfect. But can we remove the blue for easier printing? And can we remove the trees? And the people say, okay. I'm gonna say, so okay, I need to make this happen. So okay, I know how to do it with Photoshop, but I also know that DALL-E has this super cool feature called outpainting. So you can remove a few of the parts of the image, and then DALL-E can regenerate the missing part. And I use this a lot to create very nice artwork. So paf, I got it, it's nice. Now I remove the blue in Photoshop, and then that's not looking that nice. It's not very clean. You can see like the problem is that it was generated in many colors. I was struggling, so I said, okay, it's okay, DALL-E will help me cleaning this up. But then it gave me that. So no, it's too crazy. It's not what I want. It's very nice for sure, but not what I want. So I just decided, okay, I will clean it up myself with Photoshop. And I was thinking, okay, I will give this to Sam and René, we'll print that, but honestly, it doesn't look that satisfying. And at the time, I got a bit desperate. It was pretty late. I was thinking, what should I do? Should I take some, like maybe an hour to clean it up, but it will never be fantastic, or should I just change? I took like a pause. I thought, like, what should I do now? And then suddenly it's like revelation, say, oh, I'm going to input this picture again in the model and ask to generate something out of it. Say, oh wow, okay, I put this picture and ask as a neural network exciting prompt, say, oh wow, that's working. That's fantastic, I'm saved. And then say, okay, I started getting crazy. I generated so many of them, so many iterations. And you went like, wow, that's really, really wild. So I say, wow, okay, perfect, but none of them is like the kind of vibe I like. I did not feel like an emotional connection with it. It just looked like explosive. So okay, let's proceed. I even try some crazy stuff. So yeah, I thought, okay, let's see if we can put some mascot over there, but nah, it would not work. So okay. And then I thought, you know what, I need more inspiration there. So there is a super cool feature on Midjourney where there is a search bar, you can put a few keywords, and then you can see how people generate a few things. So I checked how people did generate logo AI. Someone like such a crazy prompt, of course, super nice design, but also someone just wrote something super simple. So wow, with just 4 words, I get like super cool stuff. So I thought, okay, what do I really want out of this image? In fact, I just wanted a clean white background. So you know what? With clean white backgrounds. It's literally what I put. And then I thought, oh, that's what I like. It was exactly the vibe I was feeling. I was just seeing like hundreds and hundreds. And so this is the feeling I got at the moment. I had seen hundreds of pictures of MIT in my head, colors everywhere, craziness, I don't know where I am. It's like, that's exactly what I feel right now. So that's perfect. I felt like the art, the creation, MIT, like I felt everything was there. The only thing is, there was no AI or neuron vibe. Say, it's maybe too artsy for the tote bag, I don't know. So I took some time to think again. I was also, again, getting a bit desperate, so I was saying, what should I do? And then I suddenly got a new idea. What if I blend images together this time? Meaning I'm going to take 2 different images and I'm going to merge them. Say, wow, okay, let's see if it works. And I got that, say, wow, that's pretty decent. And I kept exploring like crazy. I went on a blending, it was just crazy. I just blended and blending 3-4 images together, and I generated like some super cool design overall. I say, okay, now it's like midnight past, and we need to make a cut to choose. So everybody was sleeping. I just sent like to about 10 friends pictures, which one is your favorite? And in the morning, everybody said, in fact, that's my favorite. Okay, fantastic, but it's not the end, because we only have 6 colors available. So, it's, that's a nightmare. That's a nightmare. I did not know how to transfer this, so I looked for online tools. I say, it was so bad. So I said, okay, I need to do it myself in Photoshop. And then I had to learn quickly. I found a tutorial online, say how to convert in a few colors. I had to make minor adjustments and found some pretty cool design in like a few minutes, managed to get that. We were not done yet. We need a slogan. Thanks ChatGPT again. We generated a lot of ideas, and together in the end we just decided let's make it just simple, powered by human and AI. So that's the story. More than 200 prompts, 2 AI image generators, 3 image processing tools, and then 3 brainstormers with me and 10 friends giving their opinion. Thank you so much for listening to this. I'm so excited, and keep in touch.
Okay. Wow, that was so awesome. And also, although I've seen the process before, like seeing it again on big screen, it's very impressive how much effort, how much iteration and passion you put into this. So thank you for your presentation, and we will have Polly join us as well. Cool. All right, thank you, Polly, for joining us on stage. And for the audience, I'll do a short introduction of Polly. Pauly is his nickname. His full name is Apolinario Passos. He is a machine learning art engineer at Hugging Face and an artist that uses state-of-art generative models in his workflow. Pauly's work includes building tools to democratize access to cutting-edge generative AI and community building with researchers, artists, and the public. He explores generative media both as a new medium and as a platform to lower the barrier of entry to the art of expressing yourself. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to start off, Pauly, I want to ask you, can you give us a short introduction of how you started your journey into AI art and what's exciting about it?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I always worked on a bit of a mix between creativity and technology, but in a different field. So I worked with digital product development, and I studied communications back in Brazil, and I always was like the internet guy in a marketing agency. But when I saw the DALL-E 1 blog post by OpenAI in January 2021, I was like, just the possibility that text to image was something attainable, right? It was something that you could like type something and get something out of that, changed my perspective for everything. So I kind of like thought that I had to be in that field. I had to do something about that. And I wasn't alone. A lot of people were excited about that. And then some online communities formed over replicating DALL-E 1 open source. And from those communities, other techniques like VQGAN clip and clip-guided diffusion and disco diffusion were all processes and techniques, text-to-image pre-DALL-E 2 or pre-Stable Diffusion that started to emerge. And then in that journey, I started working with these communities, building tools, building techniques, all in the open source, all with a community. And from there, me and Hugging Face met and started building spaces there, and it made sense that we went in this journey. So I learned basically machine learning because I read the DALL-E 1 paper and I wanted to understand that.
Cool, thanks so much. And Leo, I know you're a PhD student, almost graduating, and also do art on the side. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So at MIT in general, I also teach machine learning and deep learning, and I'm so glad I have many of my students there. And I give them a lecture on deep learning, and I always start with art because I love art like for so many years. So a year ago, I showed them the first version of DALL-E 1, and I was so already blown away. I say, wow, it's super cool. And then this year, I showed them what DALL-E 2 could do, and I was just, wow, in 1 year, it's crazy, the whole thing. And then they learned that I was doing digital art, and that's how Duanchen heard about it, and I got all this opportunity to be there today. But for me, I always had this imagination in the past and the dream that I wish I had time to draw everything I could see with my imagination, but I never had the time. So now what I like is that I can iterate fast. I have the ideas, I just don't have the time. What I like with those AI models is that I can show people how I feel, how I see the world faster than I could before. That was my journey. That's how I got so excited. I'm following different ideas. I scroll through a lot of different other artist works, and I try to see inspiration from it, like going to a museum.
Cool, I love that. It's like sometimes when you have ideas, they fly by so fast and you want to record them, and now you have generative AI to kind of use that. So and this question is for Pauly. I know you've spent a lot of time in community building. I want you to kind of share with the audience about how is AI community and art linked in your mind?
Hello. So I think that it makes a lot of sense to bring those together because I feel that the space started in that space. Like when OpenAI released DALL-E 2, for example, they cited a Colab notebook in the paper too, actually, made by Catherine Krausen, which was a prominent member of this open source community. And these open source communities were all about exploration and so many things that in the last panel when we were discussing the future of creation, people were discussing what makes sense in the creative process. And I think that actually the journey of discovery of how these technologies can emerge from a community are fundamental for it. So I think that the learning that came from a truly open source and kind of grassroots movements before like big companies started jumping in was the thing that fascinated me the most. And then I think that this communities kept growing and kept evolving, and more people jumped in as these tools got more and more accessible. And now there are huge communities figuring out how best to use these technologies, also to escape the potential just reproduction of what already exists, right? So we were in the previous panel there was this discussion, can this technology create something new? And I think that the communities that are trying to figure that out, like where in the latent space are things that are not part of like the training set, and how does that even look like? I think that's a community exploration. So both for building and for creating, I feel that's a collective effort that everyone has to come together and try that out.
Yeah, that's so cool. And that leads to my next question. Can you talk a little bit about open source models and what you think are the benefits and maybe the disadvantages?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, because I think open source is something that makes a lot of sense in the stage that we're in. And by the way, that picture of me is AI generated with one open source technique called Dream Booth, where you can train or fine-tune an open source model, like for example Stable Diffusion, with a few examples of your own face or any style, and it learns it and you can reuse it on your prompt. But yeah, I think that overall the idea that open source creation is some sort of it's funny because I think everyone in the community and researchers love open source. And then I was in San Francisco last week, and I was talking to the VCs are like, oh, open source is amazing, but how can people make money? And actually, I think that it's not incompatible to business. We have Docker, is an open source company that is worth billions. We have Linux that powers all the systems, and even though Linux itself doesn't make money, it's an ecosystem that can have a lot of business potential. So I think that overall open source enables this technology to become a real foundation and enables an exploration and a discovery. And actually, for example, even on the big challenges, a lot of artists have some concerns with this technology. There are some even lawsuits happening, and and actually it's interesting because the possibility for that to happens because the base model was a research model that is open source, and then the data set is also open source, and then people could see, oh, my art is there, and actually from that knowledge they could challenge the technology. So I feel that even in the challenges and in the advantages, having the open source based models enables a societal conversation, enables people to understand the technology. It's not like a mystical, for example, OpenAI used to open source their models, and then they moved to not even publishing papers, which makes sense from a business perspective. But if we want to have a conversation with society, you really should be understanding how the models work under the hood, what are they trained on, and what are the implications of that. So I think open source can both work for businesses, for communities, and also for artists to jump in and start playing with it without a commercial layer on top that brings some complications. Because if you go and download the weights and play it in your own machine, then I think there's a lot of the challenges can be addressed in a different way.
Super interesting. And I think one super interesting question is, in the previous panel, there was a very cool discussion about whether generative AI would empower or replace artists. So it could be a controversial topic, and I would love to hear you guys' thoughts about that. And Leo, do you want to start?
Yes, I want also to tell a story about printing now. So these days, I got a new passion for learning how did humans print in the past. And it turns out that, for instance, in the 19th century, we did not have printers like we have today. So how did people get color printing? In fact, people were coloring by hand. That was a whole business. And what would happen is they would print first on something called lithography, where you print only the black color. And then you would have dozens of people coloring one by one color. And then we invented new technologies and it replaced this. So I would consider this as evolution. Things are changing, and it doesn't mean we are killing the previous things. It means that we now have two different moves, and they can evolve on the side. For instance, photography is still on today, and the digital art is another thing. But also before, we still had just drawings, paintings. You can still go to museum, people are still painting. It gives a different emotion. You appeal to different people. So I think it's different communities, and the community aspect is very important. This is what I see as well.
Yeah, and actually what he just said is interesting because actually modern art is kind of defined by the fact that, oh, painting ultra-realistic thing is boring because now a camera can point and shoot and do that, and then people were looking for what different things could be made, right? So it was a very seminal moment. But in the whole job creation and whether like this will replace jobs or, well, I think that it's interesting to think about the analogy of what happened with from analog to digital, the transformation. So film editing used to be something that you did by hands, right? So people would literally have to cut the film or use those fancy giant machines that would cut the film for cutting, and you had like one shot. If you do it wrong, it was very hard to repair. And the craft of editing a film or editing a movie was part of that craft was this physical, laborious process, and part was the creative process, right? Then we can think about the creative suites, like Adobe Premiere, for example, came up and kind of changed the way this happened, right? Like now, editing means like you go into like this timeline software and you change things. And it's interesting because at the time, some people were saying, oh, this is destroying editing because like you don't have the physical craft. And some people are like, no, this enables more, lower your barrier of entry. And yeah, and actually we kept calling that film editing, right? So it changed the physical craft, but we kept the name of what the process was. And today, there are way more film editors than there were in the 70s or the 80s, for example, because now like every YouTuber has like a film editor or a video editor. And so like if you think about professions, like a whole new economy emerged from being able to create things digitally. So imagine explaining to someone in the 70s, like, hey, by the way, in the future, your profession is going to be like editing YouTube videos. How many layers of explaining what the internet was, and then what YouTube was as a platform, and then like your job is going to be like editing Mr. Beast videos or whatever. So I think that this process is analogous. So it's hard to envision what is going to be this next big thing but I do think that this technology can empower a process where a new economy may emerge on top of that. And in this new economy, maybe we still keep calling people, this probably we will, like designers, editors, filmmakers, artists, actors, but what it means to do that may change, like the tools to use, and maybe the barrier of entry is even lowered. But I do think that there will, and the craft itself, like in the same way that if you were very skilled on cutting film and gluing it together, that became very niche. So maybe being very good at Photoshop can, in the current form of Photoshop, may also become something niche or something with a different application. But the craft of being a digital artist or a designer will remain, and I think will potentially be more accessible and transformative. And with a newer economy, when in the last panel people are also discussing how this allows more people to create. And I think that's what this technology is leading us to enabling, lowering barrier of entry, enabling more people to express themselves, tell their stories. And yeah, I think that can be a fascinating process.
What do you think are some like potential job titles that could pop up in the creative industry?
Tote bag designer. Look, for instance, I can start a new job now. I can launch a collection of shirts, as an example. Or I can be the designer of all the events at MIT. It's like a new job for me now. So if you want to launch a collection of shirts, reach out. We can do some business. But just to show that it gives creativity and people can. That's an example. And also I want to show that the idea is if everybody is able to create, is it art? Maybe the art is in the constraint, the fact that you have to appeal to a public, the fact that you need to connect. You could see like many of the pictures that generated were good, but there was something missing. And this is where the artist goes. You still have your job there. You still have to find out how you can connect with the people. And this is not given to an AI. And even if you craft maybe the right words, there is still this human emotional aspect that we are here today to make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that I don't know if I can say like what are the new job titles of the future, but I think that definitely in the new crafts of the future, it will involve people using these tools. And honestly, I think it might be the case that the titles are the same, like that. What it just changes what we do. Like the designer will mean someone that interacts with this tool in a very different way, yeah. But I'm pretty sure that new applications will come and there will be fun names. Like right now, there's prompt engineer is kind of a new job, right? I don't know how long that will last because I think part of this technology is getting so good that you don't need to prompt engineer. You just say in simple words and it does exactly what you wanted. So maybe prompt engineering is just like a limitation of the technology. So I don't know how sustainable that is because that was my first thought and then I was like, no, wait, I think actually that may not like be a long lasting thing. But definitely I think the digital artist or designer will stay kind of like this idea, but who is a digital artist or designer or what is the process of doing that? I think some will maintain and there will be like organic human-only design studios that will be praised, I think. But in a lot of other processes, I think this will become part of the workflow and become part of the background. And one thing that was being discussed on the last panel that I also thought is that like the kids now will grow up thinking, you're so old, like computers didn't even know how to draw when you grew up, you know? And then like, and when that's baseline, when that's like expected, like people will be creating stuff on top of that without even like consider. So I think we're in a seminal moment because I think this will be baseline, this will be commoditized, which a lot of people are afraid on the business side. Oh, what if this becomes a commodity? But I think we're leading to that, and I think that's fascinating because I'm excited about the next step, about the layer of abstraction on top of this technology.
Awesome, I love that. I think that leads to our last question, which is a bit about the future of the role of generative AI in the future of creative industry. Yes.
So one thing I want to mention is that generative AI can also be used, for instance, to change the world, for instance, on social problems. So another of my key challenges I'm working on is, can I use large language models, for instance, to help us design faster solutions to all the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? What if in one click, instead of generating one picture, I generated a prototype for a solution for the people on the field? For instance, Turkey, Syria earthquake, can I generate in one click an algorithm that can identify the houses that have been destroyed? In one click, can I have a resource allocation algorithm to send resources to the people in need? There are so many problems around this, and I believe we can accelerate that. The world needs right now about 3.5 million data scientists for social good. With those generative AI, I think it's a way to accelerate this progress and being able to solve those problems faster and enable everyone, even if you don't have any coding skills, to implement some things in the real world. So that's something I want to work on, and I think we have so many opportunities over there.
Awesome.
Yeah. No. Yeah, very inspired by that. I think in this overarching process, there are so many opportunities for us. Yeah, on the artistic side, I think there are many challenges also, but also many possibilities. I think the future will have to take in consideration everyone's voices. So even though I'm working with this, and I do think that the reason why open source is very important is because we're still building it. I think that for the idea of productizing on top of it has to be done with some caution. But I do think that in the future that we'll figure out like licensing, what to train these models on, and once we get past the challenges of these data sets, then I think this will become the baseline. It will be on everyone's phone. It will be part, like a whispering of Photoshop with words, right? We will be able to just create. But it's very important that if we're talking about the future, that we're addressing the challenges of the present, and that we're addressing, yeah, like there are, for example, models training right now on purely public domain images. So, for example, that would be a nice baseline for us to think about this technology in different framings, and you could like use techniques to then fine-tune it on your own art. So I think the future will look like something that takes in consideration both the technology, the societal, and the artist's voice and builds. But I think we should build in the open to be able to have everyone in the conversation.
Awesome. I would love to continue this conversation, but we only have a few minutes left, so I want to open the floor to any questions. Feel free to raise your hand, and a volunteer will hand a mic to you. Any questions?
Hi, thanks so much for the panel. It's very enlightening. Leo, I had a question for you. When you said you're able to capture what you have in your mind, and you just don't have the time to actually bring it out into the real world, and AI allows you that avenue. If the generated art is not exactly what you had in mind, how do you decide between just starting over? And you kind of walked us through it in the example, but I wanted to just get a little bit deeper into your thought process on when do you just recreate it using AI or use tools like Photoshop to make the minor edits that you have?
It's exactly the question I'm asking myself every time. Do I accept this suggestion by the AI or do I refuse? Because what happens when I get a generation, I get 4 choices because it's the public version. So do I like one of those 4 versions? If there is one that is kind of okay, I feel, okay, it's a co-creation with the computer. So I accept the fact that we are co-creating. This is why I call this carbon meets silicon. It's really a co-creation with the AI and a co-creation with all the people who generated art and images in the past. So it's like our psyche, like our brains, our imagination is merging through many people, and it becomes another way of appreciating art at that time. If I don't get at all what I want, I will just use Photoshop, or I will fine-tune the prompt until I get what I want. Sometimes I just accept, it's okay, I will make my own acceptation of how the art is. So it's randomness and serendipity at that time.
Okay, yes, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for this engaging discussion, and thank you, audience, for engaging with this. Round of applause for the speakers.